lived in Japan for 5 years. After returning home to America, I have stories to tell. To my Japanese friends, listen for entertainment. To my friends who have lived in Japan, listen for nostalgia. To my friends who want to travel to Japan, listen for inspiration. Welcome to True Stories of Japan. Let me tell you a story. I had been interested in Japan for a long time, since I was young. And the first exposure I ever had to something from Japan had to be video games when I was young. When I was in elementary school, I had the Nintendo Entertainment System, which we call the NES for short. Now this is the same as the Famicom in Japan. But in the United States, it was called the Nintendo Entertainment System, or the NES. And I played lots of games on that system. I remember playing Super Mario Brothers, The Legend of Zelda, Zelda 2, The Adventure of Link, Super Mario Brothers 2. I know that game, which in America we call Super Mario Brothers 2. In Japan, it was called Super Mario USA. Also, Super Mario Brothers 3, Double Dragon, Final Fantasy, the original, the first Final Fantasy, Mega Man, the Mega Man games. In America, this game was called Mega Man, but in Japan, the Mega Man games were called Rockman. Specifically, I remember playing Mega Man 2 and Mega Man 3. Those were big games when I was in elementary school. And of course in Japan, those are known as Rockman 2 and Rockman 3. Those were a couple of my favorite games. Also Dragon Warrior. That was the title of the game in America. In Japan, Dragon Warrior was actually called Dragon Quest. And I think people throughout Japan all know Dragon Quest. That's a really popular series in Japan. Also, Castlevania 2, Simon's Quest. That was a big game I played. And also Contra, that was made by Konami. So those are just some of the games that I played for Nintendo Entertainment System when I was young. But I played lots and lots of games. I talked about games with my friends. We let each other borrow our games. And that was probably my biggest interest since I was young and for a long time throughout my life. And that was definitely my first major exposure to something from Japan, which was video games. And of course, I knew that the games I played were from Japan because I beat most of the games, or I finished most of the games that I played. And whenever I saw the ending of the game, it would always show the names of the people who made the game, and they were all Japanese. And I know I talked about this with my friends, and we all figured it out. So I knew that this was something that was made in Japan and that came from Japan. Of course, as I got older, I got exposed to more things from Japan, and one of the other major things was anime. But of course, that didn't happen until I was in college. But my freshman year in college was 1996, and there was actually an anime club at my university. And I believe it was one of the first anime clubs anywhere in the United States. During that time, anime was not widely available, and there was not a lot of anime that was commercially released in the United States. And as a result, the only way you could really get lots of different anime back then was through something called fansub. And fansub was, of course, we used VHS tapes to watch anime, to watch video back then. And what people would do was somehow get VHS copies of anime from Japan. And when they came to the United States, people would add their own subtitles onto them and then share them. And when they shared them, people made copies for themselves. And that's really how anime spread back in those early days before any of it was really available commercially in America. And people could do that because as long as it had not been released commercially in America, people could do that and they could share copies of tapes. And since most of it was not available in America, lots of it got spread that way. And the anime club that was in my university had lots of fan sub. In fact, they had a library that they used to show us videos from. In fact, they had a library that they used to draw from to show new anime at our meetings and even let people check tapes out so they could make copies for themselves. But the meetings they had were in an auditorium in one of the buildings. And the meetings they had were in an auditorium on campus in one of the campus buildings. And I believe it was every Friday. And just a handful of students who were interested in this would come together and watch whatever they were going to show that week. I have a lot of memories from that. That was the first exposure that we all had to anime back then. And this was a long time ago. This is well before Ghibli was even famous. This is well before some of your favorite anime were even made. Many people know Spirited Away. This is well before that was even created. In fact, Ghibli was not even famous in America at this time. Most people didn't even know what it was. This is a different generation. This is during the 1990s. So a lot of 1990s and 1980s anime is what we watched back then. So anime was another thing that I was exposed to from Japan that really made me aware of the country. But even after that, and having now had exposure to video games when I was younger, and then exposure to anime when I was older, I became a lot more aware of Japan as a country, and I started to learn and hear things about what it was like and what the culture was like. The impression I had of Japan is that it was a beautiful place, it was very clean, it was very safe, and it's a place where everyone was polite to each other and everyone was kind to each other. It just seemed like a really nice, beautiful place where everyone is kind, and those things made you want to go there. They definitely made me want to go there. So this interest ended up carrying over into my studies. Now, when I started college, I actually was a computer science major. And the reason why I was a computer science major is because originally I wanted to design video games. But as I got older, I started to learn more about history, and I started to realize that in a lot of cases, the true stories in history were even more interesting than the fictional made-up stories that are in video games. For me, storytelling has been my biggest interest. And I had always been interested in the stories of video games. But as I got older and as I learned more about history, I came to learn and see that a lot of true stories throughout history were even more interesting than the fictional stories I found in video games. And that led me to want to study history. So I ended up changing my major from computer science to history. And after that, my interest in Japan followed. I actually started studying Japanese language. I became a campus leader. I was elected to serve as the president of a student organization that was all about Japanese culture. And I even planned to study abroad in Japan. And the year that I was planning to study abroad was in 2002, in the summer. Now, that also happened to be when the World Cup was going to be there. The World Cup was actually co-hosted by Japan and South Korea in 2002, and I was planning to be there. And that was a big goal of mine. I was planning ahead for it, and everything was moving forward. with studying about Japanese history, studying Japanese language, being involved on campus with the student organization about Japan, and meeting people from Japan. And I was all ready to go to Japan, but then I got sick. And when I got sick, I ended up missing a year and a half of school, and I missed my chance. Would that be the end of my dream to go abroad? Or would I still find a way to make it? What happened next? Find out in part 2 of this episode. Thank you for listening to this episode of True Stories of Japan. If you liked this episode, please follow this podcast. This podcast has new episodes every week, so please join again next week. See you next time.